What's up, everybody? This Life Ain't For Everybody back at you. Thank y'all so much for the subscriptions, the downloads. I hope you all been enjoying the guests lately. We've had so many badass musicians and athletes and admirals and jet fighter pilots, military personnel, you name it, so many different walks of life. That's what This Life Ain't For Everybody is all about. Doesn't mean that my life isn't for you or your life isn't for me. It's just that we were all put on this earth to have our own asses on our own seats on this bus and know where we fit in, getting in where we fit in and staying in our lane. And I love how the common denominator is passion and love. Today's episode of the podcast, again, is brought to you by the one and only, the iconic Lynchburg, Tennessee, Jack Daniel's Sour Mash Whiskey. Enjoy it responsibly. Never allow underage drinking. I'm going to tell you what Jack Daniel's goes really good with. Meat Church BBQ. The rubs, the recipes, the know-how, the knowledge, the sweat, the passion, the love that Matt Pittman puts into his brand, it shows. And what I mean by it shows is that this dude is freaking everywhere, from music to athletics to NASCAR to openings of stadiums to conventions to banquets to after parties to red carpet events to Traeger cookouts to Traeger instructional classes, you name it. Meat Church has exploded and continues to lead the way in the flavor profiles of our backyards. Is that fair to say, Matt Pittman? The flavor profiles of our backyards, you're killing it, my man. What's up, brother?
Well, that's my hope anyway. I hope people did what we make, but yeah, appreciate that.
Hey, I got to ask you, I want to start off by this. Like, have you ever in your career, and I know you're a young man, I don't know, how old are you, man? Are you my age? I'm 46.
I'm 46.
We're the exact same age. Have you ever... October 21st, I'm a Libra, right on the cusp.
You've got me by 1 month.
Your birthday's in September. I'm 1 month older than you.
Hey, and we're drinking the exact same drink. I just have mine in the sponsor cup.
You're in a Red Bull?
Sugar-free.
I'm trying to stay awake, dude. I've been freaking grinding just like you do. But have you in your career ever seen it this busy for backyards and people that just want to throw down on grills?
I mean, I've been saying for a while, barbecue's been enjoying like a pretty crazy renaissance over like the last, I don't even know now, 7 to 10 years, but especially in the last couple, and especially with COVID last year. I mean, last year was really insane for us, as a lot of people. But yeah, like when I got into it, I said, you get to the age where some people have little kids, you don't have a lot of time on your hands to go do whatever your hobbies were, and you're at home. And plus, the combination of that with people thinking they're foodies and want to try to make whatever they go eat somewhere. And like everybody, the common denominator is we've all got to eat, but it seems like more and more people are at home trying to cook on their own. I mean, outdoor cooking is just on fire. It's crazy. I've never seen anything like it.
When you did that little quotation marks for those watching on YouTube, I just did a podcast. We have a little segment that we have on This Life Ain't For Everybody. It's a totally different show, but it's called Breaking It Down, and I do it with my co-host Alex Crosby. We just had an episode on what is a foodie. Like, I can't find a definition of it. I don't know what it means. Is it self-proclaimed, Matt Pittman? Are you allowed to critique other people's recipes or rubs just because you are a foodie? What is a foodie? And I know that they're everywhere, and I understand that we all, like I said in the beginning of this, Matt Pittman, we get in where we fit in, but can you give me a pretty standard definition of what a foodie is?
I think for me, if you think you're a foodie, it's someone that just enjoys going to restaurants and, enjoys nice food. And, I think we're a pretty frugal family, but like we like to go eat really good food, right? Like I'd go sit down at a new hot restaurant. I'd order the whole menu, and I'm not big enough to eat the whole menu, but that's what I just want to enjoy, tasting all those different foods. And that seems to have turned into people trying to go replicate it themselves. So, I think there's good and bad, that's the good side of it. The bad side are all these guys that take their critiques to Yelp and things like that and try to give everybody their opinion like they've got a master's degree in, culinary arts or whatever the heck they think they have. So I just think it's somebody that loves eating, and appreciates really good food.
Do you think that with the explosion of this kind of, I guess it's the internet, I guess it's social media, I think it's the ability for people to get their message out there, is it good for the overall culture of being a culinary expert or a cook or trained in the arts. Like I remember when I went to college, Matt Pittman, I was in hotel management and Guy Fieri was there at UNLV. And I've always looked up to people that were educated and they get it, because there is a different side of getting it. And I'm not saying by any means that you have to have a master's degree in barbecue to do what you do or to do what Chad Ward does or whoever, right? I know you're very proficient and very awesome at it, but do you think that this explosion is good for it, or is it getting it to the point to where everybody has become a professional and a know-it-all per se?
I think it's a great question. I'm actually glad you asked it. Double-edged sword for sure. The good outweighs the bad, but I seem to get so hung up on the bad. I mean, the good side of it, if it weren't for this explosion in the internet and how people can have their voices heard, my business wouldn't be where it is. So I try to remind myself of that every day and be thankful for how quick things can spread on the internet. But at the same time, I've talked with a lot of guys that about how do you handle negative comments, or I try not to let it. It's not personal. When you get to be a certain size, or I guess the saying goes, if you don't have haters, you're not trying hard enough. So I laugh at some of it, but it's perspective is what it is, and that can come from a lot of ways. It can be formal education, like you said. It could be owning a restaurant. Who knows? But just the way people get on social media and pop off and wears me out. So I think I know where you were going with that. And I hate that aspect of it. I mentioned Yelp earlier, and that's just one aspect of it. But Dudley tells me, he's like, I don't read my comments. I'm like, it's crazy. Like how could someone critique you with as much education as you give the world on your social media and what you stand for? Like, how could someone come on and possibly, talk smack to you? But they do it. They do it to me. They do it to, everybody we know. And then I've said this 100 times lately. I think people have lost so much decency in the last couple of years. I think the way things went sideways with politics in particular, people feel entitled to say whatever they want. They wouldn't say the things they say to our faces. That's for sure. And I think the pandemic, made things worse. People were cooped up and pissed off, and they had nothing better to do but be on their computer. So I know my mom wouldn't be proud if I talked the way I see a lot of people talk online. That's for sure.
Yeah, it seems to me, Matt Pittman, that the accountability aspect of our culture and our society and communities is lost. You can say whatever you want whenever you want, and being critiqued is cool, because if you're going to be Matt Pittman and you're going to put your face on a billboard or a Traeger app or an article or an event that you do, you're opening yourself up in a way to shoulder that. And you've obviously proven that you can shoulder it. There was a movie back in the day, I don't know if you've seen it, but it's called The Chef. Have you seen it with Jon Favreau? Yeah. Okay. He works at a 5-star restaurant owned by Dustin Hoffman. They have this big foodie or critic that writes a blog come in, and he absolutely destroys Jon Favreau's pride with what he critiques his food with, leading Jon to go out, move to Miami, fall back in love with his wife, become a better father, get a food truck. And then all of a sudden that critic shows up at the end and says how good his Cubano sandwiches are and that he's killing it in life. How much, you said your comments, and that John Dudley at Knock on Archery doesn't read his comments, but what do you put in? How much weight do you put into a critique, Matt? Like if somebody says, holy cow is this, or this rub is this, how much weight do you put into that before you actually go, well, maybe they're onto something. Maybe I need to change something, or maybe I do need to improve in an area. Does that question make sense?
Yeah, totally. Well, if it comes to critiquing like something I make, like our products, our seasoning, obviously what I make isn't for everybody. And if you don't like it, I can't tell you what tastes right, or what you like. So that's okay. It's just like, I drink Miller Lite, and there's no shortage of people that tell me constantly that I drink this cheap, crappy beer. Well, who cares? Like, how bad is your life that you have to worry about what beer other people are drinking? But newsflash, it's like, 100 degrees here. And when you're barbecuing, you can't drink 12 IPAs. So anyway, so it depends on the type of critique. If it's just about like, hey, I don't like the design of that shirt, or I don't like the way Holy Cow tastes, that's fine. And that doesn't bother me 1%. But I have to put a lot of thought into what I put out there. You made the point. If you're going to put yourself out there, you have to be ready to shoulder it. And I try to be an educator. It's my life's work now to, try to inspire people to get outside and cook and to share my knowledge and things I've learned. When I was on Barbecue Pitmasters years ago, They called me a kindred barbecue. My producer said, "You're like my kindred barbecue spirit or barbecue nerd." And I said, "Why?" And she's like, "I've never met someone that knows more about barbecue than you do." So I've put a lot into learning why people do what they do. And usually the comments I read that get to me are just people that don't have the experience or the perspective, and they don't know. And that's still okay. But when they're personally trying to get a little personal, that's the stuff I'm like, yeah, okay, let's just get rid of you and move on. But you're exactly right. If you're going to have the size of following and you're going to put yourself out there, like my Instagram is my reality TV. It's like what we just ate. And, not everything you cook is Instagram worthy, right? I don't have a camera crew following me every time I make a meal. But then you start to feel this pressure that what you put out there has to be at a certain level because people come to expect that from you. But, responding to those takes a lot. Like I said, try not to let them bother me. But if there's something that is worthy of a response, I usually just write a pretty professional response because I do read most of our comments, and then on I go about my business.
I want to turn you into a critic for 1 second, Matt Pittman. You just mentioned Miller Lite. You have a common bond with one of my favorite bands in the world right now, Whiskey Myers, from your home state of Texas.
Yeah.
Southeast Texas, I believe. East Texas.
East Texas.
Cody Cannon and the boys, they played Little Rock, Arkansas 2 nights ago with my friend Jamie Johnson, and I had several friends there that said it was so hot, the temperature, but they said the music was insane, the show was insane. A lot of people said that it was the best concert they've ever been to. But being a critic yourself, Matt, why is Whiskey Myers so badass? Are they badass? Do they represent Texas the way that you love to see Texas represented, being a native? But why did they get so big and sell out everywhere and have such a cult following?
They're East Texas boys. If you sit down and talk with them and you hear their accents, they're just Texas redneck boys. And they say good old fashioned rock and roll. And they kind of edge on, I guess, Southern rock. Like if you like Skinner or some people call them Texas country, but that's not, to me, they're more rock than country. I just think they're just like doing it their way and it's caught on. They're hardworking dudes. They're good dudes. They're all just great guys. And Cody's, wears our hats regularly, which I'm super thankful for. But I mean, hey, like now people are ready for life to get back to normal. Like I just talked to my wife about this. Foo Fighters just played the Garden 2 days ago. I feel like life is getting back to normal, when that happens. But her cousin was actually at that show in Arkansas. So I've been meticulously looking at their dates, trying to figure out when they're going to be here. But they put on just a good rock show. And they were blowing up right before COVID. So I think they're about to really go big now.
So when you have had the pleasure of cooking for Cody and the Whiskey Myers crew, are they a traditional Texas barbecue kind of crew or do they have any special requests? Do they need like some frog legs or some weird shit, or do they just like the brisket and the burnt-ends?
Yeah, they let me do what I want, but the last time we cooked for them was their album release party, and I made smoked bologna, and Cody wouldn't quit talking about that, and he went home and made it shortly thereafter. But you want a funny story? He called me during their time off, and he was wanting help with a brisket. I said, "Well, how big is the brisket?" And he said, "Well, it was from one of our cattle, so it didn't have a weight on it. So I took it down to my bass boat and I weighed it on my scale, and it was like 12 pounds." that is the most Whiskey Myers thing I've ever heard in my life.
He hung it from the hook.
Yes.
He hung it from the bass hook.
I was like, dude, I need to go big with that story, but more people need to know about that.
That's just an awesome way to live. Like, They didn't guess. I mean, he actually took the time to walk down to the shoreline or the marina or the dock and actually put it on the scale. That's what I love about Cody, is he's just cool as they come and down to earth. And then when he gets on there, he's so unassuming. When you look at Cody Cannon, you don't really think that you're getting ready to see or hear what you get to hear and see. Yeah. You know what I mean? He's an incredible performer. And what is the secret, Matt Pittman, to good barbecue? You said that you're trained in it. You've been called a nerd. You've been called a spirit animal for others in the facet of barbecue. Some people get it and some people don't. I've tasted brisket to where it's made me never want to put a piece of brisket in my mouth again. But I've also had your brisket and people that we run with to where you could put it in a taco, to a salad, to just a plate of barbecue with some beans or whatever. It's incredible. What is the secret to a good brisket? Can you give away some hints? I know that you teach classes, but can you give me some hints to brisket?
I'm happy to. First and foremost, if you come to my classes, I tell people that I'm going to show you a very straightforward way to make amazing barbecue. I'm not here to out-chef you or give you a 3-page recipe. And you just have to pay attention to certain things, and it's really not that hard. With brisket, I mean, it's as simple as a 2-step process. Whether you're cooking on a Traeger or whatever, smoker types that people have. Starts with good cut of meat. I want to start hopefully a prime brisket, but choice makes a great brisket if you can't afford or have access to a prime brisket. And I don't necessarily think you need to cook Wagyu beef. Like, that's really not all that practical. And I'm not sure that it's worth the price unless you're in a competition. But nonetheless, Texas barbecue is simple. It's seasoned with 50-50 salt and pepper and cooked with post oak. We use our Holy Cow rub, which is about 80% salt and pepper, and then it's got a little garlic in it. So it's a great brisket rub. But I tell people focus on 2 things. Smoke it nice, low and slow until you get to about 165 or 170 degrees internal temperature. And that low and slow, you can be anywhere 225, 250, even 275. But if you've got the time, lower is always better, just to develop really nice bark. Second step of the process is I wrap it tight in unwaxed butcher paper. If you don't have that, use foil. And you got to cook it till it's probe tender and don't rush it. So probe tender in the flat, usually just over 200 degrees, 202, 203, 204. But don't hang up on that number. Like, use an instant read thermometer and check the flat and make sure that when you're poking it in the middle of the flat, there's just no resistance. But you got to be paying attention because you have to stop the cook process at that point. You've got to pull it off and rest it. At least for an hour. You don't want to slice a brisket while it's hot. You can leave it wrapped. You can set it on your counter at ambient temperature, either outside or inside, and let it rest for an hour, and it will not get too cool in that hour. If you need to hold it longer than an hour, I'll let it sit out on the counter for half an hour, and then to make sure the cooking process stops, and then I'll put it in a Yeti. If I'm resting it for up to 2 hours, I'll put it in a Yeti with the latches fold under the lid so it doesn't close all the way. If you need to hold something 2 to like 4 or 5 hours, then I'll latch the Yeti. And that's really about it. But I get lots of questions about like, oh, you cook on a Traeger and you get that dark bark. I don't do that. Well, people are cooking their stuff hot and they're rushing it. We cook our briskets fat up in Texas, which goes against a lot of, common people that we know. And no offense to anybody, there's, a lot of ways to skin a cat, but a lot of the friends we have in common come from a competition world where you cook meat side up because it presents better for a judge. But here in Texas, we cook everything fat up and you'll develop better bark that way. So if you're worried about that, that's kind of how we do it. And I've got tutorials on Meat Church YouTube channel showing you how to trim a brisket, smoke a brisket, stuff like that. But starts out with good ingredients, and just the thing for me is just paying attention to what you're doing. Watching the visual cues, looking at it. If it starts to look dry, spritz it. Maybe you need a water pan in your cooker. Just keep an eye on it, and then it's trial and error. My first brisket wasn't as good as my last brisket. So, I cook my butt off and until I get it where I want it to be. But once it finally hits for you and it's to your liking, it's like a magical moment where you're like, holy crap, that was fun. And you want to do it again.
4 questions. I love all of that. What temperature do you like to have a wood pellet grill and smoker? We both love Traeger. What temperature would you say that slow cook process should be at?
Well, and so if there's anybody watching that follows my recipes, my published recipes with Traeger are at 275, but that's because most people doing long cooks like briskets and pork butts, normally they are doing that on a weekend and they're like doing it on a Saturday because that's when you have that many hours to do it. I know times have changed with COVID and people are home more often, but that was kind of my all right, you got 10 hours to get it done. This is how you do it. But if I want to make my absolute best brisket on a Traeger, I have a video on our YouTube called The Weekday Brisket that was published prior to the COVID shutdown. And that was like, how could you cook a brisket when you're at the office? And what I do there is I actually take the brisket very low. I'll put it on in the evening, anytime at night, and put it on at like 190 degrees. So super low so that it won't finish. And I just let it ride low overnight. Don't touch it. Don't open it, nothing. The next morning I would go out and wrap it up to protect the color and get some moisture protection, wrap it up tight. And then depending when I want it, if I wanted it for lunch, I would increase the temp to 250 when I woke up. If I want it for dinner, I would just slightly increase the temperature from 190 to like 210 or 220 and kind of baby it through lunchtime. And then I would crank it to 250 and allow it to finish around 4 o'clock or so. Give yourself an hour or two to let it rest. And it makes that's like a long, it could be 16 to 20-ish hour process, but is an amazing pellet grill brisket.
When you start talking about, the rest period, you said that it does not continue to cook and it also doesn't cool down that much. What is the optimum internal temp that you want to slice a brisket at when you start to use one of your thermopins or another kind of thermometer?
Yeah. So let's just say that this brisket was coming off at 203. And if you pull that brisket out, let's say it's wrapped in paper. If you pulled it out and you put it straight in a cooler, the ambient heat would continue to carry over cook. This is like a steak. Like if I'm cooking a steak to medium rare, which is 130 to 135, I would pull it no more than like 128 because the temperature is going to keep going, 4 or 5 more degrees and get you just over 130. Well, with the brisket, it's already tender. You don't need to cook it anymore. So when you pull it out of the Traeger, like I said, I set it on the counter. Like we're in my outdoor kitchen. I set it on the counter and let it sit for 30 minutes and it's barely going to come down. Like it probably come down 10, maybe 15 degrees in 30 minutes. We actually tested this about a month ago. We left one on the counter for 1 hour and it was still like in the low 170s when I went to slice it, which people don't believe that because they're like, no, it's going to get cold. But in that hour, the moisture in the muscle fibers is out at the end of the muscle fibers. And so when you're resting a brisket or a steak or whatever, the muscle fibers are relaxing and that moisture is redistributing throughout the meat. So that gives you just a juicier bite. If you cut it too hot, steam, juice runs out. That's just robbing yourself of those juicy bites. I want to get it down to more in the 140s or so, and I don't have like the perfect number, but a lot of restaurants hold briskets at like 145. There's some people that hold them a little hotter than that, but in the 140s is kind of where I'm trying to be. So it's still nice and tender and really warm. And you could go below that, but I kind of like to take it down to about the 140s.
So it cooks to 204, pull it off the grill, rests for 60 to 120 minutes, 1 to 2 hours, and serve it after slicing it when it's down to internal temp of around 140 degrees.
Yeah, about 145 and slice it to eat. So if you're not going to eat the whole brisket, don't slice the whole brisket. Just slice off what you want. Brisket dies a really quick death, as soon as you start slicing and it dries really quickly. So I only slice off what my guests are going to eat. And then if I have any left over, I'll wrap it in like food service film, which is, fancy cellophane, wrap it really tight in that, or vac seal it with as much of the jus. Like if you had any leftover of the juices that came out, hang on to that, vac seal that. I know you didn't ask me about reheating, but it's always good.
No, I love that. I also am very interested, Matt Pittman, on the two different cooks. You have your Saturday all day, stand around with a couple cold beers and buddies like it's a pot of jambalaya or gumbo, because I love doing that with my Cajun friends. But I also like the idea of standing over a grill or a spit around the pool or whatever. Is there a law or a rule, Matt Pittman, to go by for each of those as far as the poundage? You said Cody's was around 12 pounds, but I've seen good briskets up 17, 18, 19, 20 pounds. Is there a law per pound of how many hours per pound on each of those different cooks?
Yeah, the first thing I'll say is, I wouldn't mind if I was cooking a 12-pound or an 18-pound from a taste perspective. It's not like a turkey where I like smaller turkeys. I don't like the taste of large birds. But brisket, it's okay to have a bigger one. I tell people that at 250 degrees, budget an hour a pound. And that'll give you plenty of time, to get it done. But I usually go by 15. If I'm doing the Saturday during the day cook. I'll usually buy about a 15 pounder because I'm going to take about 3 pounds off of it, leaving me around 12. And I know I can get that done in about 10 hours. So that's to put it on early, like you said, hang around the pool, eat it right then, eat it then. I feel like that's the traditional. I just think that's what the public does, right? They go to the store on Friday or the weekend and they want a Saturday brisket and they start it at 5 or 6 or 7 in the morning. So that's why I have that method out there. And that's why you see so many people doing a meat up brisket that gives you this quarter, half-inch smoke ring. You get all the likes on Instagram. But I promise you, slowing it down and cooking fat up actually makes a superior tasting product, in my opinion.
I've had a lot of...
Depends on your circumstance, right? Like who knows how much time you have or how busy your family is or whatever. So, so many ways to skin the cat, like I said earlier.
Well, let's say that you do have some time on a Saturday. I've been asked a lot of times, Matt, is it true with the Traeger that you can set it and forget it? Now, we just talked about how we like to have a cold beer with our buddies and stand around. Is it safe to open the lid on one of these wood-burning, pellet grills like the Traeger we recommend? Is it okay to look at the brisket during the cook? You talked about spritzing it. It's a convection style cook with the airflow and that type of heat element that's in the Traeger. Educate me a little bit on, should we open the lid? Is it okay to open the lid? Do you turn the brisket? Do you flip the brisket? Do you keep it fat up the entire time in Texas? How should I answer that question?
Well, old saying, if you're looking, you're not cooking, but, you got 500,000 followers on Instagram. You got to open up, take a picture here or there.
Yeah.
But it's okay to open it. I mean, that's part of it, especially if you're with your buddies. You want to look at it, see how it's going, and be like, oh my gosh, look at that bark. So the Traegers recover very quickly, especially if you bought one that has been out in the last couple of years, the D2 models. Those things recover so fast that even if you open it, they're going to get back to the temperature you wanted really quickly. So I don't think there's anything wrong with opening it. Now, as far as moving it, if I'm just cooking one in the grill, I pretty much won't move it. But it's good to always know your cooker, whether it's a Traeger or anything else. You need to know where the hot spots are in the grill. And I'll get into this. I know we're talking a lot about Traeger. A lot of people, when they see me cook a fat up brisket, say, do you not realize the fire pot's right in the middle? That's why you should be fat down. Guys with big pits rotate meats around if there's hot spots. So depending on where your heat source is coming from, you may need to move it just based on that. But if I'm cooking one in a Traeger, I normally put it on the second shelf. So it's not right, the fire pot's not blasting it right beneath it. But I don't flip it or turn it unless I need to. I pay such close attention to the meats that I'm cooking. If I'm on an offset pit and if my fire is coming from the right side, then I actually spin the brisket to where the part with two, or where it looks like two muscles stacked, the bigger part is closest to the firebox, and then the flat is over here. So that fattier big point is catching the brunt of the direct heat. So you do have to pay attention to things like that, depending on what you're cooking on. If you're cooking on like a Kamado style grill and there's slits, the openings around the edges, well, odds are part of your brisket may be hanging over that edge. And so you may have to kind of rotate it. But you don't have to flip it or do anything dramatic. Just kind of watch how it's cooking and adjust if need be. You might even put a little piece of foil on the smaller ends or something like that.
Last brisket question, Matt Pittman, Meat Church. What is a cap? Do you always trim a brisket no matter where you get it from, assuming that the butcher did not? And then the next is the application of the Meat Church dry rub. Is there a such thing of too much dry rub on a brisket? Do you do both sides? Do you do the cap side, the fat down side with rub as well? What does a dry rub do? I know that's a long-winded question, but talk to me about taking that cap off and then the application of the dry rub and what that rub is doing.
Well, so when I first started teaching barbecue, I was really cognizant of the fact that briskets aren't cheap for a lot of people. And everything you trim is something you paid for. And I'll just say this, a lot of guys just throw their trim away. I mean, I think the majority of people, home cooks that are cooking one brisket, will trim it up and just throw the excess away. So I wasn't trimming things to the degree that I have been the past few years. But I said, you know what, screw it. I'm going to teach the right way, which is let's trim this brisket now what I call pretty aggressively, because I want to be left with a perfectly as uniform as piece of meat as possible. So like on the flat, I cut where it gets really thin on the flat, I'll cut it off. And again, I have a brisket trim video on my YouTube that shows this. Because if you don't do that, when you go to cook the brisket, when you cook the thicker parts to perfection, the little thin stuff is going to be dried out. Now, I hate to say this, if you're feeding that thin part to your kids or your neighbor, maybe you don't care. But if you come to Texas and we go to a barbecue joint, you have brisket, every slice off that brisket has to be perfect. Barbecue's a religion in this state, and you can't serve anybody one bad bite of brisket. So briskets are trimmed, like I said, pretty aggressively. Now, I take all that trim and I do something with it. And I'm not trying to push our YouTube, but this past week's video we just dropped was 100% utilization of your brisket. Take your fat and render it down into tallow, and take your meat trimmings and use them for burgers in that case, sausage, whatever, right? We all need ground beef. So I use all of it. I'm not wasting anything off of it. But to your point about the fat cap, I had a guy comment the other day and he said, I don't trim any of the fat because that's the best part. And I just laughed. I'm like, you sound like my granddaddy telling me the crust was the best part on the pizza. If that was the case, why didn't you just get a big old crust? And like, why bother with the tomato sauce and the cheese? Yes, fat is flavor, but in moderation. So I trim the cap down to about 1/4 inch, maybe a little more, depending, because, I'll get briskets that have like inch and a half thick fat. Like, who the hell would want to eat that? Like, that's crazy. So I do trim that down to 1/4 inch, and then I season all sides. So we got first responders here flying by. Hopefully the Meat Church isn't on fire with the sirens in the background. Anyway, with the fireman here, I'm like, hey, you get an alarm from the Meat Church, you know what we do, you better get here quick.
Yeah.
So you could slather or not. A slather is like a mustard or an olive oil or something to help the seasoning in here. I'm known to not slather a whole lot. Use our Holy Cow real even across the entire brisket. Meat side, fat side, sides, really even application across the entire thing. And that's pretty much about it.
When you start talking about it being a religion down there, and I know that your brisket is awesome, where would you go if you were just visiting Texas? I want to get back to the barbecue instruction in a minute, but I've seen a lot of, the DIY or the Food Network shows in your state. Is it the best barbecue in the world compared to the Carolinas, compared to Memphis, compared to Kansas City? Those I would say are the four. Would you agree those are the four barbecue capitals of our country?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question too. And I try to spend a fair amount of time talking about that. I always say I appreciate all the regions of barbecue. I really do. Texas is not a barbecue sauce state. Good barbecue doesn't need sauce. So I saw someone come up with the Texas barbecue sauce the other day. I was like, what the hell's that? There ain't no sauce in this state. But I wanted to say that, but I didn't. But barbecue sauce is my favorite condiment. So, and like I said, I've said this a lot. If you and I got on a plane and we flew to, North Carolina and we had a vinegar-based sauce, you would never, ever find that here. But I love the taste of that sauce, or mustard sauce. I love sauces. And, I appreciate the fact that like Sam Jones Barbecue back in the days of Skylight Inn from the 40s, they do nothing but put salt on a whole hog, and then it's sauced with a barbecue sauce that's cider vinegar, Texas Pete's hot sauce, salt and pepper. I mean, it's the most simple thing ever, but the sandwich tastes so complex. To your point about Kansas City, if we went to Kansas City, the Burn-In, maybe the best bite in barbecue, right? Very famous. It's the fatty part of a brisket, cubed, sauced, put back in a pit for an hour. Iconic. Again, we don't use barbecue sauce here, but I certainly put it on my burn-ins. So then you bring it back to Texas barbecue. I was born in Tennessee, spent a ton of time there in Alabama, grew up on pork, and it was all sweet. It all had barbecue sauce. Come to Texas, at some age, I had a beef rib. Well, the first thing I had was a chopped beef sandwich, which is nobody goes to a barbecue joint to buy a chopped beef sandwich if you're trying to like grate them. But I know that's the first thing I had. It was in the parking lot of the grocery store I worked at. And I was like, dang, because I'd never had beef barbecue like that. Got a little older, went to Lockhart, Texas, the barbecue capital of the world, and had a beef rib seasoned with salt and pepper, and like snapped my head back moment, like, holy and it was like nothing I'd ever had. The rendered fat on top of that beef rib with that bold pepper bite. I wholeheartedly think that Texas barbecue is the best. When you travel the world, you see Joe's Texas barbecue or blah, 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 Texas barbecue. You do see some of the others, but not that often. You're not overseas and see such and such Carolina barbecue. Everybody wants to be Texas barbecue. Now everybody's prideful of their area and they all think they're the best. And who knows? It's all personal opinion. But we're lucky. We cook beef. Big cows bigger than all the pigs and chickens and everything else. So we can claim dominance that way.
Well, when you start talking about beef and the dominance, you also mentioned earlier about the man that the guy that wrote in about how he keeps all the fat on. You also mentioned earlier, Matt Pittman, Meat Church, that there's this thing called Wagyu out there. There's an explosion in our country of Australian, Japanese strains of Wagyu beef. My personal opinion is that it's kind of like, how can I explain this to you? Like, it's kind of like ice cream to me. Like I get all excited. It's a hot day and then I have one bite and I'm good for 6 months. Okay. I'm not saying that ice cream's bad and I'm not trying to sound like I'm some keto expert. I'm just saying that I'm that guy that gets over a chocolate bar or a bite of ice cream in one bite and I don't need it. Wagyu seems to be the same to me. And I don't know if I'm on this, if you're going to agree with this, and I'm not asking you to, Matt, but is it, and I love companies. We both worked with, Snake River and a lot of the great companies out there. But it's almost too much to me. It's very, very rich to me. What is it about it that people love? I guess my question, Matt Pittman, is this. Is it a status symbol to eat Wagyu beef? You're killing me with the great questions. And these are not pre-scripted. So, I think part of it is status and money, right? If you knew you could go to your grocery store and get a steak for $300 and then there sat one beside it that was like, I don't know, $150, clearly the $150 one's better, at least so you think, or you see this intense marbling in the Wagyu and like, ooh, I got to have that. There's that. I'll say this up front. Love Snake River. The people in the organization are some of the best in the world. If you go to Barbecue Comp, you're cooking their briskets. That levels the playing field because that's what everybody cooks. And, Benny Kendrick, friend of ours, love Benny. It's all he cooks. I've never gone that route with myself or my brand because it's not practical on a Tuesday night for, the people that I'm sharing what I do with. Like the majority of my followers can't eat Wagyu they can't afford to eat it that many days a week. But to your point, it's rich at times. But let me give you a really cool example. We had a barbecue school here 2 years ago in this kitchen, and there were 40 people in the class. And when I teach brisket, I need to cook 2 in order to feed 40 people. And unbeknownst to the class, I fed them, I made 1 Wagyu and 1 prime. Now it was not Snake River. So I want to clear that up, but I handed it out or my team handed it out in a boat, and we had a Meat Church toothpick flag in one slice and the other slice had nothing. And I said, hey, I want y'all to take note. We prepared these different. So just take note of what you like better. And so they all ate it. And then I said, okay, raise your hand if the one with toothpick was better. And 30 of the 40 raised their hand. And I said, okay, was it twice as good 2, 3, or 4 times? Let's just say 2 times. Be conservative. Was it twice as good as a slice on the right? And no one raised their hand. And I said, okay. The one with the toothpick was Wagyu. It cost $150. The one with no toothpick was a prime, and it cost $55. So 3 times the cost. And not a single person said they'd go buy it. Now I'll make a point about that. It was another brand. I'll leave them nameless. So you started mentioning this in the beginning. The thing with Wagyu, just because it says Wagyu doesn't mean it's 100%, and it's usually not. And they're crossbred, or, there's something back up the chain where it's not 100%. So you don't know what percentage you're getting a lot of times when you buy it. And this particular one is fairly popular in Texas. It's not from Texas, but it's making some noise around here. And it's good. I mean, it's not bad, but I love that taste test because, every single person was like, nah, I wouldn't go pay that money for what it's worth. I can't say it better myself, Matt, as far as I've done the same thing. And again, I'm a huge fan of SRF. They are an incredible organization and people, just a great family business. I love them and I love their quality. I mean, their tomahawk is some of the best nights I've ever had in my life. You mentioned we mentioned the regions of barbecue in our country. How diverse is Matt Pittman, are you, with world barbecue, meaning that one of my favorite restaurants that I've ever eaten at in my life, and I know that they have these in Florida, they have one in Vegas now. Texas de Brazil in Fort Worth is probably one of my top 5 dining experiences. I've been there 3 or 4 times and I loved it every time. But Brazilian barbecue, Argentina open spit barbecue, where they're, chaining and wheeling it up and down. Are you a fan of this? Have you mastered these world styles of the South America barbecue? And how do they stack up with Texas flavoring? What's the difference there? Because Texas de Brazil is a brand and it says Texas in there and it says Brazil in there. Are there similarities, or is it just because it's all meat all the time?
Yeah, well, it's mostly grilling. So I'll tell you about some of my experience. Like behind me, this is a Santa Maria grill. So that's California, but it's direct fire underneath where you can raise the grates. But this is out of the frame. But over here I have a rotisserie. So a Carson Rodizio rotisserie that's 6 skewers. It's kind of like spit that I can actually put across this grill. And one of the best things, and I haven't done this in a while, but one of the best things is to get picanha, which is really the signature at Texas de Brazil. Slice it 1.5 inches thick with the fat cap on it, turn it into, it looks like a C, put the skewer through it like this, and just put kosher salt on it and just spin it on this thing. And, just like in the restaurant, slice off the edge, let someone eat it, put it back on, and just continue to do that. And talk about simplicity. I mean, you literally just put salt on meat and spun it over direct fire, and it was that good. I've got a mill scale open fire table that has a lot of components on it. It has an iron cross on it. It has a dome on it, an asado dome. Those are pieces that I'm trying to get better at. We used at some food and wine festivals over the past few years. They put on a good show, but it's just about mastering direct fire underneath a meat and adjusting it to where it's cooked perfectly. And, it's hard to take a whole animal and cook it properly without drying out certain pieces of it. Certainly not as experienced in some of the areas outside of the country as I want to be, but that's where I've relied on a lot of my friends that live in other areas that have been willing to teach me and show me. And I've started to bring in more, grills that do that sort of cooking, because that's the origins of barbecue, really, cooking over direct fire like that. Yeah. So when you come to Fort Worth, I'll meet you at Texas de Brazil.
I'm serious. You're going to be there in August. Let's hook up. Yeah. Go to Billy Bob's.
I'm definitely here.
Okay. Well, I'll message you after and tell you the itinerary. On the subject of social media and hate mail, you brought up a point that I just have to ask. I saw a shirt the other day, and I know it was yours. I think it was yours. It had the word vegan on the shirt. Okay. Are you okay? There's been artists in the world, singers, actors, that kind of alienate part of their potential customer base or fan base because of political views, or they just, like, I won't personally watch a Robert De Niro movie anymore, self-admittingly, because I just don't like some of the things he says about our country. Okay. That's all I'm saying about Bobby D. Used to love him. But do you get a lot of hate mail from veg heads and vegans because you are the Meat Church? You cook meat for a living. You grill meat for a living. You Traeger meat for a living. Do you worry about it? Because I know you got to be friends with some, right? Like you're in so many different facets. You got to know a lot of vegans and vegetarians, right?
Yeah. I mean, our police department here in Waxahachie, the assistant chief is a vegetarian for health reasons. And he held a class here with his 20 police officers as a team building event. And, he chose to eat the meat to be part of the team building. And I think he was crap in water for 2 days. But yeah, like I don't think that you have to eat my lifestyle or anything like that. But I do believe, I think you need meat in your diet, but that's not what your question. So let's see, it was on the day of the NASCAR All-Star race, would have been 2 weeks ago, on one of our Instagram pages. We have Meat Church BBQ Supply. It's really around our store here in Waxahachie in our online shop. We decided to repost a joke, which was a guy grilling with like a not vegan friendly shirt or something like that on, and the caption said something like, I eat twice as much meat to cancel out what any vegetarian thinks they're doing. I just thought it was funny. And go look at it. I haven't deleted any of the comments, but there are a lot of negative comments calling us out on it. And I was like, dude, at what point did people lose their sense of humor? Like, it's a joke. And so I left it and took it. But anyway, if you have a Meat Church type Instagram account, vegetarians find it, but we don't get a ton. But when they jump on there and say like, not going to stop until all cages are freed or whatever, they normally get jumped. Our audience self-polices and they kind of have fun with it. So we don't get a ton. I mean, we not enough to really worry about it, to be honest with you. I mean, I don't go around poking them other than that. That might've been the only joke we've ever made, which lesson learned, I guess. We try not to dip our toes in anything polarizing at all. We just are going to keep our heads down and do our business, and because you just can't have an opinion anymore. So we just kind of keep it to ourselves.
In the movie Bull Durham, there's a quote that talks about the church of baseball. You hear Southerners say that turkey hunting and duck hunting is a religion in the South and Southeast. Barbecue is a religion you referred to in Texas. Have you had any hate because of religion, because of the name of your brand? And you don't have to answer this if you don't want to, but I'm sure you can. I get it. I understand what you're doing. I think I've even seen some of your designs and graphics and artwork, some of your digital art with stained glass in some of your designs with Meat Church, which replicates the inside of a church. You're at mass, you're at a service. Have you taken shit for this, Matt Pittman, that people are like, well, that's unholy or something like that? Does that question make sense?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I mean, honestly, less than 5 times since 2014 have we gotten a comment. I mean, maybe about 5 or 6. I think there's been, I can only remember 2 or 3 comments in the last couple years. And it gave me, so I put a lot of thought into this. I'm Southern Baptist. And Jeremy Andrus. So I named the company before I knew Jeremy, but shortly thereafter I had a meeting with him and he said, here at Traeger, I think you can put 1 foot over the line, just don't have 2. And I think that's appropriate because people appreciate edginess here and there. We don't try to be disrespectful though. But the name Meat Church, it's perfect for us because I tell people we're here to bring people together to make great memories around good food. Like I said earlier, your life centers around food. Think about how much time you spend around a table, eating with other folks, sharing a drink. Meat Church is about people coming into this backyard and having a good time. The fellowship of that, it's that simple. So it's cool because you take 2 words that don't belong together, put them together. Now, when you walk through the airport wearing a Meat Church shirt, you're going to get stopped. This is the coolest phenomenon. People are going to be like, what is that? I'll tell you, the very first festival I ever did, I was wearing a Meat Church shirt and a priest comes walking up to me, like with a little white square. And I was like, oh boy, here we go. And he got up to me, he said, Meat Church, huh? And I said, yes, sir. And he said, that's a church I can get behind. And I thought, whew. But conversely, to your point, the amount of emails I get from preachers that say like, hey, I brought this into my men's group, or, we cook this or this at church. I get a ton of that. So it's actually been very cool. My grandparents did, or my grandfather did say, why did you name it Meat Church? And I told him, and he moved on, and, lifelong deacon in the church. And he was the one I was really worried about. But seriously, maybe 5 or 6 comments since we started, which has honestly been shocking. So I'm definitely good with that.
Yeah. It's one of those things to where I would assume that somebody would look at it and get it, but there are those people out there that might put a little too much into it. When you start talking about your product line, let's get specific. And I know that we're coming to the end of our time together. I truly appreciate you coming on the show. This is Matt's second appearance. Our first one was recorded live at the Kansas City Royal with Leith Lofton.
I even wore this shirt to commemorate when we first met.
I love it. Oh, it is Royal. I didn't see. I could only see the top of the horns when you were sitting close to the screen. When you start thinking about the product line and the success that you have endured over the last 60 months, and maybe a little bit longer than that, but it's just come on so strong. What do you tell people that have so many choices, Matt? When you go into a boutique or your barbecue store, and this is what's cool about your store, is that you don't just sell Meat Church. That's badass, right? When you go into a Traeger store, they don't just sell Traeger rubs. What do you tell people? Get one of each, cook as much as you can in life and use them all. What do you tell people? How do they make a decision? I understand you have to try it to find your flavor preference.
Yeah.
But you have to have the right approach to be the founder, CEO, whatever your title is, El Presidente of the Meat Church. You got to have the right approach to this. It's one of those things to where you can't say everything ends with the Meat Church rub. You know what I'm saying? Like your rubs are badass, but how do you approach that when somebody wants to know, is there anything else out there when they go to get their selection?
There's a few ways I could answer that, but by and large, I focus on our social because I'm the one behind Instagram. And if you go look at it, you'll be hard pressed to find me holding up a bottle saying, you have to buy this holy voodoo. Like, that's not what I do. I just show you my food. Like, here's what I made and here's how you can make it. And I just say, it's like, here's a brisket and here's what I did to cook it. Now, I do say that I use my stuff, but I've been doing that since the beginning of time with our Instagram. But when I started, it was just a hobby, right? It was like, here's a pecan cobbler I made on my, blah, blah, blah cooker. And that was just what I was doing. It was just Instagram's visual. And I was just showing you how I made food and I was proud of it. So what I did not realize at the time is I was teaching you how to do it and starting to push a company ultimately. So we're still doing the same thing today. Like, I make all these YouTube videos, like we have real production. I, hired my video guy and you would not believe the amount of time we put in before we shoot a video. I tell people it's like writing a cookbook. You can't change the words once someone's bought the book. So you better make sure what you say is what you meant to say. I pour my heart and soul in this whole thing. I think all of that comes through. I think that's why it's working. I mean, I'm just a everyday guy like anyone else cooking, and that's all I'm focused on. I'm going to cook my ass off. Like someone well-known in barbecue made a comment to me in the past few years. It said, no one posts as much as you do on Instagram. And it was kind of like a little piss and vinegar. And I said, you mean no one cooks as much as I do on Instagram? Because while we've been on this podcast, literally, we just hit 500,000 followers on Instagram. And last week I did the math on the number of posts I have times an average amount of cook time. And I thought it's a lot of work. And I'm proud of it. But if you come to our shop and where we have multiple things, fortunately, we're selling a $10 product, right? It's not like I'm selling a $1,500 grill where you may have to make a choice. I'm like, like you said, this is what I do. This is what I like. I think you would like it. Why don't you just try it? But try what you want. And, all this stuff I sell are friends of ours. You can try them all and hopefully come back. But in the end, I'm trying to sell a lifestyle, and it's about belonging to a community of like-minded people. And those people kind of want to do the same thing and push each other like, oh, honey hog's my favorite rub and I put it on this. What do you put it on? Oh, I've never thought of putting it on salmon. I should go try that. Oh, my kid puts it on popcorn. And, just what you can do with it's kind of endless. But I never thought that creating some seasonings would get to this, where our private Facebook group, the Meat Church congregation, just hit 110,000 people. I'm like, 110,000 people just in our private group. It's almost bigger than our corporate, our normal Facebook page. So it's really pretty crazy phenomenon. But honestly, I don't tell people what to do. I don't even tell people like you should cook on a Traeger. If somebody comes to me, and Traeger knows this, if somebody says, man, I'm thinking about buying a Big Green Egg or a Traeger, what should I buy? I start with questions like, all right, how busy are you? Do you like the science of like running a fire? Are you just super busy and you just want to have better food than comes out of the oven? And I'm big. I really don't tell you what's the right way. Even in my videos, look, this is what I'm using today. I'm using Holy Cow. It's near and dear to me because I developed this in a parking lot. But you know what? Use whatever rub you want to use, which by the way is really crazy that you spend thousands of dollars making YouTube videos, but you have to say like, you can use whatever you want or you'll get skewered. But that's not the only reason I do it. Like, I just want people to cook however they want. And we've built a brand big enough at this point that as long as we stay where we're at, my family will live a happy life. And hopefully we bring joy to people and, we do this to have a good time. That's why I can't stand the negativity. Like, I don't like when people are talking smack for whatever reason. So I'm like, just get outside and cook and be happy. That's why you did this in the first place. Quit bitching about how I did what I did, and you go do what you want to do.
Well, there's two reasons for that in our culture and society and country, in my opinion, Mr. Meat Church Matt Pittman, is that ego can be a bitch. And no matter how good you are at something, if you can show the passion and the love for it and why you're doing it, then that's all that matters. Because I think the people that get pissed, it's for two reasons. One, their ego's telling them that they're way better than you and they should be bigger than you, and they might not have what it takes to do what you do. And that really bugs them. And two, they don't have the ability to properly prepare the food the way that they do. And then when they try it, they don't get it. So instead of learning from somebody that's proven like Matt Pittman, they really have a blockage in there. So the first thing that they do is, if they can't be as good as you, they're going to break you down. They're going, Taylor Swift has a line in a song, and I don't mean to refer to Taylor Swift. At one time, she was really country, and I have a lot of respect for what she does in ways of art, but she said, people throw rocks at things that shine. That ladder's high to get to where you've gotten. And when you're climbing it and you're just in your backyard at 2014, everybody's like, go Matt, go, you're really doing it, man, that's great. But then you get there and all of a sudden you got you got a lifestyle and a culture and a brand and a store and a happy family. It seems to bug people, and it's so ass backwards of like, man, just get up earlier and work harder and let's all strive for this. We were all given the opportunity to do this,
right?
And that's what's so badass, to see a brand like Meat Church get to where it's gotten, and hear you say that all you want to do is bring joy to people. That should be enough for the haters to be like, you know what? I'm going to go out and try that, and I'm going to learn from that. Nobody's stopping anybody from becoming a good griller or a good grill master or a good barbecuer. Go win the Royal, go win the Jack Daniels, go win the Houston Rodeo. Go do something that makes you sit down at night and go, man, that was badass. I did that. And then you're going to have the haters. It's not going to stop. You know what I mean? It's always going to be those people that think that they should be there. They can't figure out how you're doing what you do. Even though you're giving them an open book and an instruction manual, they still can't figure it out, and that drives them up a freaking wall. So that what happens? No accountability, keyboard muscle, haters. It just keeps making the world go round, my man. All you got to do is say, we're doing it, and you deserve the congratulations. That's what I would say, is keep kicking ass. I love it, but it really does drive you nuts when you know that somebody's going to get on here and go, oh yeah, I can beat that. I can do that. Well, go do it. Just get up and do it.
Yeah. Here, one of the big things is people will go to a barbecue joint and they'll try brisket and they'll be like, oh, I can make a brisket better than that. I'm like, well, you might be able to make one better than that. But this guy had to make 60 I got a buddy here who sold 150 Saturday, and every bite of those 150 have to be amazing. That's a whole different ball game. And why do you care if you can make one better? Cool. Then go do it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I had a guy there's a pretty big barbecue group locally, and someone posted something they cooked with one of our seasonings, and this guy got on. I woke up early one day and he'd commented at like 2 a.m, which is a good sign that he's hammered. And he said something about like, well, Matt Pittman just seems like the biggest douchebag and da-da-da. And I was like, dude, what the hell is your problem? But yeah, I'll even kill him with kindness at that point.
Well, think about that. This guy that's not even from Texas, right? Like you're a Texas at heart, but you're not born and raised there. Right, that right there is going to make a true Texas barbecue guy go, all right, well, I'm a one up on him. And then they go onto your Instagram and they see you standing with arguably the greatest Dallas Cowboy quarterback of all time. I don't know, maybe Danny White, but Troy Aikman is considered the best of all time in the organization. That's arguable. I take that back. But Troy Aikman is a freaking badass. And there is Matt Pittman cooking with Troy Aikman. That's going to piss some people off. And then you're at a Whiskey Myers backstage cooking for Cody and the boys. That's going to piss. You know why? Because that shit's awesome. It's awesome. And you know what? It's hard for a guy like you, and it's really hard for me. And I don't know if you ever feel like this, but sometimes I'm like, man, I do kind of feel guilty. Why do I get to have all this fun? But Matt, I'm telling you, it takes hard work to get to where you've gotten.
You didn't just wake up and these guys want, to come on a hunt with you or whatever. Like it's a culmination of things. Like you're a pro at what you do, and people want to work with the best. And so You don't have to make any apologies for it.
You know what I'm saying, though? Is that's what's crazy is that you almost found yourself going like, holy shit, I get to do this today? Did I really just get to go experience that? I'm just a duck hunter from Reno, Nevada, and you're just a barbecue guy in Texas, and we're sitting here living a dream life, bro. And I'm not bragging. I want to bring joy. I want people to live through us vicariously. I want other people to do it. I want to be an inspiration or an influence to somebody being like, I want to have the next foul life. I want to be the next Meat Church. That's what it should be.
Yeah, because they're coming. I mean, there's somebody out there working on it. So
yeah.
Well, I'm hopeful that now that, like I said, hey, Foo Fighters playing in the Garden 2 days ago was like, all right, that's a sign. Shit's getting back to normal. Hopefully people, get a little better. But I don't know, man. It's, if you ever want to get in a bad mood, just go read Twitter in general. And it's made me just like Twitter's where I just go drop a post and I leave because I can't handle any of the crap on there. Not about us in particular, but people have lost their mind. So
last question for Matt Pittman, the Meat Church. What song is on the radio? What cold drink? And it can't be whiskey because I know what you drink and it's not Jack Daniels, even though you might enjoy it once in a while. What are you drinking? What's on the radio? Who's at your table? Where are you at? And what's on the grill?
Oof.
It's the ultimate Meat Church experience with friends.
Oh, man. That's a tough one.
If you don't want to do the part of who you're with, then I understand that part. You can answer the other ones.
No. Wait, that's fine. I just have to, and I've experienced some of this lately, but.
Would it ever be chicken, Matt? I'm not trying to interrupt you. I don't want to interrupt you. Would it ever be chicken?
Oh, that's a good question too. The Houston Rodeo was won a few years ago on a chicken, and everybody was like, "What? Like you can't win a world championship in Houston, Texas on a damn chicken?"
Was that our buddy Doug?
Well, Doug won it. Well, yeah, Doug and Jamie Gear have both done it. So, yeah. How crazy is that?
So it could be chicken.
I really wish I could try that chicken.
Me too.
Well, I mean, So I'll give you an interesting response to that. A couple of years ago, the American Royal, at Memphis May, I'm sure you've seen this, how we're right across the sidewalk from Dave Grohl of Foo Fighters, which I know I've mentioned, but #1 rock band or favorite band of mine of all time. And I'm like the plane has just landed and I get a text from Chad Ward. He's like, yeah, Dave Grohl's in our tent right now. I'm like, you have got to be kidding me. And so, I get in the Uber and get there as quick as I can. He's there all weekend. He's a huge barbecue guy. So later that night, we're 100 yards down at Peg Leg Porker's party doing shots off a shot luge, me and him next to each other. And I just looked at him and was like, can I take a picture with you? And he was like, well, if you didn't ask me, I was going to ask you.
No way.
Tell me from Adam. He just was saying that. But, just super cool dude. But, I mean, hey, for me, it'd probably be it's always family around the table. Like, we're a huge family. But, man, a lot of Monster vodka in this family. That's not a very barbecue drink, but my wife drinks Red Bull vodka and I drink a lot of Monster vodka. Our best times though it's at our lake house. And then I don't know, man, it's Foo Fighters, Whiskey Myers, who we've talked about are definitely in my top. So we work with a lot of country artists, but I'm a rock guy at heart. So that's probably where it's at.
And what's on the grill?
It's always brisket,
Always brisket.
I'd love to give you something fancy, but if you're going to come to Texas, we're going to smoke a brisket. I got a new pit last week, and they're like, what's the first thing you're going to cook on? I said, what the hell do you think I'm going to cook on it? It's not going to be a chicken, I'll tell you that.
It's going to be a brisket, and it's going to be – I love how you laid it out at the beginning of this. I got to be really transparent with you of – I messed up so bad the other night, and I did not know – that you rest the brisket that long before you put the knife to it. I had no idea.
Well, just call me or text me anytime you're cooking. I'll help you out. But yeah, if you, I can text you a picture. We shot a brisket for a thing we're doing for a partner. And I was like, hey, you know what? We should cut this brisket up real quick for some photos. Cause it was like, we're going to serve it to our staff. So we cut it, I don't know, man, like 20 minutes after it came off the Traeger. And you can tell it's not rested in the photos because it's almost white looking inside. It's nuts. It's totally different. So it's very obvious when you look at it that it was way too hot.
Matt, can people contact Meat Church and besides buying your rubs, can they can they book you for a private event? Can you travel? Are you willing to travel out of the state of Texas to cook for an event? Do you do this type of thing? How do people get a hold of you? And what is kind of the idea of what you want? Do you pull a trailer up to a parking lot and throw down? Do you have to have a bunch of stuff waiting for you? Are you self-contained once you arrive? Can people work with Matt Pittman, the Meat Church, at one of their events?
Yeah. So there's only one of me, and I do have a team, but I don't have a full-time culinary team because that's not our focus. So usually when barbecue's involved, you're talking to the guy that's going to make it. And we're proud of that, but that means it's super duper limited. So we have lots of options. I do have a 40-foot trailer that's about a 30-foot kitchen, certified, commercial kitchen with 2 massive pits on the back of it. I've got an old, brand new, actually, trailer rig, real vintage looking, 530-gallon smoker. Like, we can throw down some serious barbecue. But said earlier, family first here. And so my travel outside of Texas is extremely limited. We live at our lake house during the summer, which is why it was so hard for you and I to connect. So in the fall, we will be available. I don't do it too often, but I often joke, if you're trying to get me to cater your son's 8th birthday party, I'm probably booked. But miraculously, when Luke Bryan calls, we happen to be available. So.
Well, I'm hoping that Luke Bryan's status lives up to a hunt camp, because we're going to do one this year with Cody.
Oh, yeah, we got to do that.
Keep in mind, I'm going to talk to you off mic about 2 things. That's Matt Pittman. It's Meat Church. There's a couple different Instagram pages now. Go ahead, Matt.
Meat Church is the main one. Meat Church BBQ Supply. We put a lot more of our product stuff on there, but Meat Church is the big one. And like I said earlier, our focus right now is YouTube. We're putting out a lot of super cool stuff on there. So,
and YouTube is at Meat Church also?
Yes.
Become a subscriber. Get in their Facebook group. 110,000 freaking followers, members of a Facebook private, the congregation, 500,000. You know how many freaking people that is that follow somebody that cooks brisket? That means you're a badass brisket griller, cooker, barbecue master, pitmaster. Matt Pittman, the Meat Church. This life ain't for everybody. He is the freaking man. Thank you, brother, for coming on.
Thanks for having me, man. Thanks for sticking with me through the scheduling nightmare, but it worked out.
Heck yeah, this was perfect, brother. I appreciate it. We're going to end it right there. This life ain't for everybody. Jack Daniels, thank you so much. Lynchburg, Tennessee Sour Mash Whiskey. Enjoy it responsibly. Never allow underage drinking. Thank you, Jack Daniels, for believing in the culture of everything we do here at all of our brands. Tom, Jake, hit that button. You know what, Matt? I'm going to let you pick the song. Which Whiskey Myers song do you want to go out with Cody and the boys?
Oh, man.
Stone?
I don't know. Yeah, well, I'd say Broken Window Serenade.
Oh, there it is. Broken Window Serenade. Listen, I had Broken Window Serenade, Virginia, Stone, and Frogman on 4-song rotation in the pool the other day. People are like, what do you do? And I'm like, don't touch the button, dude. Don't touch the button. They thought the record was skipping. I'm like, no, it's not. Just leave it right there. I'm having a nice day. That's Matt Pittman, Meat Church, Cody Cannon, Whiskey Myers. Thank y'all so much. This is Broken Window Serenade. Tom, Jake, hit that button. Peace.